My mac and cheese with cottage cheese and sour cream recipe is going to be amazing. This was inspired by the Terry Crews mac and cheese recipe that I saw here on YouTube. In addition to being really flavorful, this Southern style mac and cheese casserole is going to be really easy because there's no flour and no roux. After looking at the Terry Crews recipe and researching others on places like allrecipes.com, I think I've created the perfect Parnell the Chef version. Here I have an 8x8 casserole dish that is well buttered, and over here I have 8 ounces of cooked whole wheat elbows. What I did is I brought some water to a boil on high heat with some salt and a little bit of vegetable oil. When it came to a boil, I added 8 ounces or about 225 grams of the pasta. I kept it on high heat and I boiled it for 10 minutes, drained it, and then I added 1 tablespoon of butter and mixed it in and melted it with the residual heat. Of course, I'm adding cheese, a lot of cheese. I have 2 types of cheddar, mild and sharp, 1 8-ounce block each, and I took about a quarter of a block of each and put it off to the side. So I have about 100 grams of cheese, a little less than half of a cup off to the side that I'm going to use for my topping. I'm going to add 1 cup of small curd cottage cheese that is full fat as I measure 240 grams, and 1 cup of full fat sour cream, 240 grams. I also have another quarter cup or 60 grams of sour cream off to the side for the topping. Honestly, I was going back and forth as to whether or not to add milk. Usually I add evaporated milk, but I'm not going to open a can of evaporated milk for potentially just a little bit. So I'm going to use up to half of a cup of regular whole milk. I may add less, we'll see. I'm sure you could use skim, whatever you have on hand. I am going to add a lot of flavor to this. I'm going to use 1 teaspoon each of garlic powder, onion powder, and black pepper, as well as about another 1/8 of a teaspoon of all of those in the topping. This mac and cheese with cottage cheese and sour cream casserole is going to be held together with an egg. Like I said, no flour, no roux. Usually when I make mac and cheese, I layer everything, but I think this is going to be really hard with the cottage cheese. So what I'm probably going to do is I am going to mix together the egg, the sour cream, and the cottage cheese, and then I'm going to mix that with the elbow. I added my egg to the cottage cheese, so I'm just going to mix that in. Now that the cottage cheese is mixed into the elbows, I'm going to add the sour cream. This is not big enough, I don't think, to add all the cheese, so what I might do is I might add half of it now and stir, and then the other half I will layer in. I think I'm going to do the same with the spices. I'm going to add some now and then layer in the rest. I've decided to add some of the milk, at least a quarter cup, because even though the Terry Crews recipe did not call for any milk, I just think it's going to be a little bit creamier if there's some milk. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put some into the bottom here, about a third. I'm going to add some more of the cheese. More of the spices. And I'm going to add more of the noodles. And then I'm going to try to maybe not mix, but definitely combine them to some degree. Now I'm adding more cheese and then more spices. It's definitely comfort food at its best. It's time to work on the topping. Like I said, a quarter of each block of cheese, 100 grams, just under half of a cup. I did half mild, half sharp, quarter cup of sour cream, 60 grams, and 1/8 of a teaspoon each. There's my oven of black pepper, garlic powder, and onion powder. So I'm literally just going to mix everything together. Like I said, I'm just mixing the sour cream and cheese together. And then I'm going to add my spices. So all parts of this mac and cheese have flavor. Spices all throughout. I think that adding some spices is what really makes a southern style baked mac and cheese casserole good. So now I am going to just take this topping and place it on top of the casserole. My goal is to spread it out, so I'm going to put it in little, I guess, blobs, for lack of a better way of describing it, all over the surface. And then I'm going to spread those out. The bottom is not solid, so it is kind of hard to spread something out on a surface that is not solid, but it can definitely be done. Also, it does not have to be perfect, so just do your best. When this is done, I'll bring you back. My cottage cheese, sour cream, and cheddar mac and cheese has been in the oven at 375 for half an hour, and just as I anticipated, it's browning a bit more around the edges than in the middle. So I reuse aluminum foil, and a lot of people criticize me for this, but I am just going to reuse the foil from my last mac and cheese. I am just going to put strips of foil around the side here to help keep the edges from browning too much. I would not put the foil on right away when you first put it into the oven, because if you do that, then I think that as the cheese melts, if it's touching the foil is going to stick to the mac and cheese. It's going to stick to the cheese, and it might not be a nice presentation. So I'm going to put this back in for probably 15 more minutes, and then it should be ready. My mac and cheese with cottage cheese and sour cream is now done. It was in at 375 Fahrenheit, uncovered for 30 minutes. Then I took it out of the oven and put these strips around the edges and put it back into the oven for 15 minutes. So it cooked for a total of 45 minutes. In terms of appearance, I think my mac and cheese casserole turned out perfectly. It was a really nice golden yellow color, exactly what you would expect for a southern style mac and cheese with cheddar. And because I put foil around the edges when it was almost done, it cooked pretty evenly too. And when I took my first bite, I was really glad that I had stumbled upon the Terry Crews mac and cheese recipe and that I decided to add my own spin to it, because this was absolutely delicious. I have multiple macaroni and cheese recipes here on my channel, but honestly, I think that this is probably my new favorite. I was actually a bit nervous about this recipe because I wasn't sure how adding cottage cheese to mac and cheese was going to turn out. But I did some research online, and people said that the combination of cheddar and cottage cheese would give your recipe a taste similar to using hoop cheese, a traditional regional cheese in the southern United States that is said to make some of the best mac and cheese. And after seeing the Terry Crews recipe, I knew I had to give this a try. Why add cottage cheese to mac and cheese? I think adding cottage cheese to mac and cheese does a couple things. Not only does it add volume, but it also adds moisture, and very importantly, it adds tanginess. Although it's actually pretty hard to make a legitimately bad mac and cheese, there's no doubt that some recipes are better than others. And one of the reasons why mac and cheese can sometimes be a bit bland is the lack of tang. I've noticed that a lot of traditional southern ingredients in foods like buttermilk and cheddar cheese are actually tangy. Just like adding lemon juice to berries brings out the flavor, in my opinion, adding something tangy to a savory dish takes it to the next level by emphasizing the flavors. Although I thought that this mac and cheese casserole had the perfect amount of tanginess, some people might find it a bit too tangy, so if you want to cut back on the sour cream and cottage cheese a bit, you definitely can. Another reason why this recipe was so good was that I added a good amount of spices. 1 teaspoon each in the casserole itself, plus extra in the topping. Just like any other casserole, when you're making a southern style custard mac and cheese, you have to add a good amount of spices because it takes a lot more than you would think to make it flavorful. I also really liked that this southern style mac and cheese casserole had the perfect amount of moisture. As you can see, it wasn't dry at all on the inside, but it still kept its shape when cut, so in my opinion, the texture was perfect. Although you might think that 2 8-ounce blocks of cheese plus cottage cheese plus sour cream would be too much for an 8x8 casserole, I actually thought it worked out very well. Like I said, I really liked this mac and cheese with cottage cheese and sour cream recipe, and I will be making this again. And when I do, I'm not going to change a thing. I think it's absolutely perfect just like it is. I'm uploading this recipe in May just in time for a Memorial Day barbecue or the 4th of July. It would also be great for Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Sunday dinner, or just because. This is a really good example of how you can take a good recipe and add your own spin to it and make it your own. So if you make this recipe, I know you'll love it. As always, thanks for watching. See you next time.